with you very distinguished members of the fourth realm. As usual, we have a tradition of engaging the press on contemporary trending issues every 3 months, every quarter, in the year. But this is this is a special engagement out of our tradition or our convention of the ones in a quarter engagement, because we thought there was a need for us to intervene in the ongoing matter concerning fuel price increase. In a reenactment of public reaction, every time the pump price of premium motor spirits, PMS, increases, the Nigerian public space has been thrown into turmoil over the latest hike in price. The new price range from 850 naira a litre at Nigeria National Petroleum Company Limited owned filling stations to 1,200 naira a litre at stations owned by independent marketers. The public reaction to a new petrol price regime has been the trend. This public reaction to new petrol price regime has been the trend since 1988. As always, the government is the culprit of the new price regime. The price intervention policy was first conceived and implemented in 1973 to offer cheap petrol to the public due to an oil increase crisis in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War. That was when the Organization of Arab Oil Exporting Countries, the precursor of the oil-producing and export countries, OPEC, collectively embargoed the supply of crude oil to the United States of America and began a series of production cuts. These cuts nearly quadrupled the oil prices from $2.90 a barrel before the embargo to $11.65 in January 1974. The ensuing rise in oil price sent shockwaves worldwide, and the cost of petroleum products, especially the famous petrol brand, skyrocketed. To lessen the impact of the petrol price increase on Nigerians, the government, under the leadership of then General Yakubu Gowon, announced the policy of subsidizing petrol price. The subsidy is occasioned by fixing the product price, usually below the market price, and paying the difference between the market and the fixed price. Since that 1973 intervention, we have been stuck with the vagaries of subsidies. Of course, many countries across the world initiated different subsidy mechanisms to the high petroleum products price increase. At that time, the Nigerian government subsidy intervention was rationalized by the enormous earnings from the crude oil price increase of more than 400%, which left the country more or less flush with petrol dollar. It was a convenient policy of simply giving a small proportion of the revenue to cushion the impact of the price increase on the Nigerian poor at that time. General Olusegun Obasanjo, then military head of state, also formalized the petroleum subsidy regime into law when he numbered it among products for which the government would be responsible for fixing their prices and for which they should not be sold above the fixed prices. Again, this was supposed to be a short-term measure to cushion the rising international oil price. It was intended as a temporary fiscal measure, as a temporary fiscal response to an oil price hike instigated by the actions of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. At that time, that was in 1977. It is, however, instructive to note that under the two principal protagonists of subsidy, the price of petrol recorded increments in response to emerging economic realities. Under Gawan, for example, the price increased by 40% from 6 kobo a liter to 9 kobo a liter, while under Obasanjo, it skyrocketed by 70% from 9 kobo a liter to 15.3 kobo a liter. Our argument is that subsidies were introduced into the Nigerian economic ecosystem as a consequence of the availability of fiscal resources. They were then a mechanism for fairer redistribution of the country's wealth among the populace. In time of huge revenue earnings, when there is downturn to the 1 trillion naira, the country had to borrow to finance fuel subsidies in Nigeria in 2022. A further examination of the subsidy regime shows that households in the bottom 40% of the income distribution account for less than 3% of fuel purchases at the pump. According to a survey by a private firms, public transportation services, government agencies, and other businesses consume 3/4 of all fuel sold in Nigeria. Most vehicles used, meanwhile, most vehicles used for carrying large numbers of people and goods are diesel-powered and are already deregulated. Also, household kerosene, which people with low incomes mainly use, is no longer subsidized, meaning that people with low income are already, to a large extent, paying market prices for their own type of fuel and energy. This means the government mainly subsidizes those who can afford fuel at the market rates. So whose interest is the NLC advancing? We are in a new era, aptly thematized as the Petroleum Industry Act era, PIA era. Regarding the subsidy regime, Section 5E of the PIA 2021 empowers the NNPCL, that's the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, with the sole mandate to provide pricing and tariff frameworks for natural gas in midstream and downstream gas operations and petroleum products based on the fair market value of the applicable products. Similarly, Section 215 of the PIA also emphatically stated that the dynamics of market forces should determine the price of petroleum products for the NNPCL. These are the letters of the PIA, the law regulating the petroleum industry, not President Tinubu's off-reference summary dismissal of the subsidy regime in his 29th May 2023 inauguration address. We find it surprising, however, that the same people who want full adherence to the provisions of the PIA and clamor for it are the same individuals who want the president to subvert the law. To avoid doubt, it will amount to a breach of the law for the president, government, or even any of its agencies to attempt to determine the price of locally produced fuel even when the Port Harcourt refinery begins to roll out fuel, whenever the first phase of the ongoing rehabilitation is concluded. It will still have to sell the product at a market-determined rate as a commercial entity. Anything other than this will amount to interference from the authorities and a return to subsidy, especially if the price has to be lower than the market rates. We dare to submit that we subscribe to the doctrine and practice of a liberal free market economy in which private capital and investments compete favorably to drive social economic development as championed by President Tinubu. Surprisingly, the NLC is exhibiting a doomsday disposition in this matter. We therefore call on the NLC and indeed all Nigerians to eschew this traditional resistance to market-determined pricings. We assert that this pricing principle is the route to truly developing the country's mainstream and downstream sector, and thereby enabling Nigeria's long-forgotten petrochemical industry, which is a major employer of labor and a veritable source of raw materials to flourish. This is the larger extension of Nigeria's growing potential to become the petroleum refining hub of the West African region. If the NLC must protest, it should be concerned with driving this vision, the vision of making Nigeria the dominant refining hub in Africa, driven by the private sector. The labor movement should also be focused on compelling the federal government to speedily roll out the adoption of compressed natural gas, CNG, an energy source that has been confirmed to be cleaner, vehicle-friendly, and way cheaper than petrol. Meanwhile, without the NLC agitation, we are witnessing what the government is doing in the health sector with the National Health Workforce Policy to transform Nigeria's healthcare and reintegrate the diasporal professional into the health care sector. We consider this a social revolution by its standing. In connection with this, and to the applause of the Nigerian Medical Association, the federal government has already started implementing the Medical Residency Training Fund, which is in full swing. This is enabled by savings made from scrapping fuel subsidies. And of course, if we all remember, most times resident doctors had gone on strike. It had always, one of the major principal demands had always been their training fund, as provided here now. Our appeal to labor and all Nigerians of good conscience is to actively engage the government in channeling resources that would have been funneled into the ruinous subsidy regime to developing the health sector, the educational sector, and providing functional infrastructure that makes businesses grow. Difficult as it appears at this moment, we can assert that only market-determined petrol pricing can unlock the true but latent potentials, capacity, and capabilities of the Nigerian nation and its people. Gentlemen of the press, this is the crux of the matter. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, sir. That's a good one.
Serious.
On a quick note, before we take questions, we're going to take your questions.
What was responsible for the cost of rice? Cost of increase in the price of rice, despite the fact that subsidy had been removed on diesel. Of course, we all are students of basic economy. And we also understand the fact that no single factor is responsible for price movements. That when the price of a product moves, it is a combination of different factors. And in case of rice, for instance, it is about our major concern, security. It is about the fact that, as a matter of fact, we have devalued, or we are experiencing or recording depreciation in our national currency. And to that extent, it had made our products cheaper, especially our agricultural products cheaper. Do not forget that at a point in time, we have a high traffic of our neighbors in the West African region come into Nigeria to purchase our food items. And now, because of the incidental that our naira had depreciated, it had made our products more attractive, price attractive, you know. So it is established actually that because of this depreciation of our national currency, more people, more West African neighbors are going into our farm gates and are buying more of our products. For me, as a financial expert, as an economic follower, as a communicator, it is an opportunity. Your products are not in high demand and you complain. So it is an opportunity for the government, especially at the state level, because the state government are the ones responsible for using, are the custodian of our land, of our agricultural land especially. So what we are saying essentially is that we need to have an agricultural revolution to provide the needs, you know, of even not just Nigeria, but our neighbors. And we will be able to commercially and profitably, you know, engage our agriculture. So here we have, in this situation, we have found ourselves in a dilemma, positive and negative. Negative to the extent that we have more demand, higher demand for our products, for our food items, because of the cheap, you know, price that accompanied the policy of harmonization of foreign exchange windows. But again, it has also thrown up at the same time opportunity to produce more, sell more, earn more. And of course, this is an opportunity to be able to say that the non-oil sector, you know, will be adding more to our foreign reserve, perhaps more than crude oil. That is one. Two, subsidy removed in the last. What is the savings from last year?
What would you
Yeah. And what? Well, it is. It is common knowledge. I don't want to use the legal terminology. It is a common knowledge that starting immediately from August last year, there had been a quantum increase in the allocation of the federal government, of all tiers of government in Nigeria. The fact allocation, you know, exponentially increased by more than 50%. At a point in time, those of us that follow economic activities and policies in Nigeria, especially in the wake of the recession, 2016, 2017, 2018, when our federal allocation was at a point in time less than 300 billion. And it was just managing to hug, you know, 900 billion when COVID came, and it went down again to 400 billion. Now we are seeing situations where sometimes 1.2 trillion are distributed. Evaluation. No, is it? No. You see, we have the dollarized mentality. What we spend in Nigeria, what is the basis of our accounting, is naira. And that is why even the Oyibo men, the Oyibo economists, tells you, evaluate your GDP along the line of the dollar and along the line of purchasing power parity. Because, as a matter of fact, what your 1,000 naira will buy, or what your 10,000 naira can buy in Nigeria, $150 cannot buy in America. And we can also establish, it has been established, that for what you spend $1,000 on in America, you only need to spend 120,000 naira in Nigeria. And today, Nigeria is number 27 globally on the purchasing power parity ranking because of the nature of our economy. Now, the challenge, of course, is that since we discovered oil, we were supposed to use oil as a driver of our growth. And subsidy itself was introduced to empower Nigerians at that point in time when our population was less than 80 million. And we had kept to this basic policy that had traduced whatever may be the developmental potentials we had. Because again, when you have resources and you are driving it on consumption, you have challenges going forward. So we had more or less retained ourselves in the same circle, of underdevelopment since that 1973 that this subsidy was introduced. So we have been moving around in circle. We have not in any way recorded any form of substantial development. Because again, you are spending more than 30% of your resources on consumption, and not just consumption that develops. We have just analyzed how those that are supposed to benefit from subsidies are actually the ones, subsidizing those who are strong, enough to pay for their fuel needs. I'll give you an example. I cannot say this particular year, when the US decided that the way big engines, especially SUVs, was consuming petrol products, and that they want to discourage the use, of SUVs. The price of petrol products was increased, and there was a policy to encourage people to trade in their SUVs, because yes, they may have the money, but these things are consumers. They affect the general supply of the product, and they encourage people, to trade in their SUVs. But in Nigeria, the more prices are increased, the more numbers of SUVs you see on the roads, and you wonder who is subsidizing who. You cannot go on an average state capital or federal government capital road, and in a 10-minute circle, you will see at least 10 SUVs. Those are guzzlers. They are PMS guzzlers. Who is subsidizing that? That's not supposed to be the target of subsidy. The target of subsidy are the people at the bottom of the pyramid. They are the people that are supposed to be developmentally pushed up. If we are not attending to those people, for God's sake, let us channel whatever we are saving, into education. Our primary schools, even in the hands of primary schools, even in the hands of local government, are not doing very well. But with increase in revenue, we will know that they will do well. And that is translated to what is shared at the level of FAC. Yes, the condition for increment of this minimum wage. Well, I am very sure none of us here. Okay, local refinery. What I know, and I think the government had also adopted that position. Government has no business in business. The refinery business is a highly specialized corporate business. And thankfully, about 2 weeks ago, we saw a publication requesting for experts who have capacity to manage refineries to apply for those Nigerian refineries that are undergoing rehabilitations. We hope we'll get to that point. Now, when those refineries are delivered, it will be sheer stupidity, I'm sorry to use that word, for government to still insist, that products of the refineries will be sold at subsidized rates. Selling at subsidized rates is what had actually killed that industry. Because the industry, the oil and gas industry in Nigeria, is not about PMS alone. In the 70s through to the early 80s, we had a vibrant petrochemical industry. By the time all our refineries got under the water, that sector that drives textile, that drives the plastic manufacturing sector, electronic sector, manufacturing sector, had disappeared. And they disappeared with jobs. They disappeared with prosperity. So can we sit back and review what exactly had been our benefit than walking around this circle since 1973? And that is why we thought this is not a popular position to take. We know that. It's not we have just told you how a poll has shown that 73% of Nigerians are against it. It is not a popular position to take. But the truth of the matter is, if we have to move, if we have to develop, if we have to leave a legacy of prosperity for the next generation, we have to take this matter by the horn and fight it. So, my dear brother, for me, where I'm concerned, let the refineries be operated as independent, private-driven refineries. Let them produce, let them earn, and let the earnings, go into the pocket of the federal government that will be shared by the FAC, because at that level, we have more money. It is true that we have challenges with some of our governors that have access to this increased allocation. But all of us, either at the level of the media, at the level of civil society and all that, we are focused on Abuja alone. Our governors are earning more, sometimes 3 times more than they were earning. Our local government chairmen are earning more. Can we start monitoring them? Can we start asking them what they are using their money for? So it's not just about the federal government. I was particularly impressed when I saw the policy on the National Health Program policy. For the first time, if you remember, most of the time the resident doctors were going on strike. A major point of conflict had always been this residency training. And it's even worse because a residency training leads to consultancy status for a medical doctor. So if you don't have a strong, motivated residency training, it impacts you. And it has been one of the reasons most of the doctors were leaving Nigeria. So this program is not just talking about funding the residency training. It is also talking about reverse migration, that funds will be made available in a way that the health sector will be upgraded, and those doctors that have found their ways outside of this country will start coming back, because there are now resources to build and to properly equip our medical centers and other health-related agencies. Have I answered you? Thank you. The Marxist. I used to be a Marxist. The fact of the matter is the base of your question has to do with the president making commitments about the 70,000 minimum wage, and that price of fuel will not be increased. Sincerely, I was not part of that negotiation. And what we are seeing is that the government, the federal government, has said they never entered into that kind of agreement. And I think nobody, no consensuous thinking, logical mind would make that kind of agreement, to tie your hand, you tie your own hand in future maneuvers, by such agreement. I think it's not appropriate. So yes, you have a right to enjoy the fruits of your compound, as you put it, my dear friend, STV. Yes, Silverbird. But the truth of the matter still is, if you keep eating the fruits of your garden, and you are supposed to also buy clothes, and those clothes, you have to use money, to buy those clothes. After you have finished eating the fruits of your garden, where would you get the money to buy clothes? So what we are saying here essentially is, yes, you have fruit. Can you have a higher percentage of the fruit you are getting from the garden sold, so that while you are still eating, you can also have money or fund to acquire other forms of life conveniences? Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Dear friend, is the only comrade that we have retained our comradeship in the Nigerian media. But you see, elections should not be. Elections are not destinations. They are journeys. It's only in Nigeria that we see an election as an event. It's a continuum. So when the candidate emerges at the level of the party, he represents certain philosophies and certain ideals. I am hoping that Nigeria will develop to that level, where we appreciate policies, so we can identify all the parties, for policies they stand and they advocate. In this case, we are seeing an evolution, a growth of policy thinking. It is yet, perhaps except from the APC, that had clearly come out by its name to define itself as progressive. And in the books, either in ideological books and other references, there is a philosophy of progressivism. So I am waiting to see other, such other bodies, either by name or by what they stand for, espouse certain philosophies. So that is why sometimes there is a fear in the Nigerian political space when we are going into election. But I think the Edo election will come and go. It will be peaceful. It will be peaceful. The best candidate will emerge. And why I think it will be peaceful is that we have moved away from a time of federal government application of might, because that used to be the major point of incitement, in any political environment. So we have moved away. As long as the federal government is not using its might, as long as the state government understands its own limitations, the people will be allowed, to express their civic responsibility. But more than anything, we are praying that the Nigerian political space will evolve into an understanding of what policies are all about and how individual political parties and entities espouses these policy dispositions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen of the media and press, we thank you for